It happened again today, twice in fact. Afghan forces turned their guns on international troops. In Farah province, a new police recruit shot and killed 2 Americans just minutes after receiving his gun to begin training. And in Kandahar province, an Afghan soldier wounded 2 coalition troops. There was no word on their nationalities. That made 7 incidents in 2 weeks involving shooters in Afghan army or police uniforms, so-called green on blue attacks. In all, there have been 29 such attacks so far in 2012, nearly double the figure from last year. At least 37 foreign troops have been killed, including 21 Americans. The toll for all of last year was 35 coalition deaths, 24 were Americans. For more, we turn to Mark Thompson, Time Magazine's Pentagon reporter. Mark, start with the latest incidents. So the one in Farah, for example. Do we know anything more of the motive or who the person was?
Well, we know he may have been a new recruit, but he was either 60 or 70 years old. He was a farmer. This was the local police force, not the national police force. He'd been recruited only 2 weeks ago and signed up with other fellow villagers to maintain a local presence in that far western part of the country when the American troops leave. He got his gun, he did his target practice, and he turned and killed 2 American special forces.
Well, so the obvious question, that in many of these things, is to what extent who's carrying out these so-called insider attacks? To what extent is it infiltration from the Taliban? To what extent is it other things?
When you talk to folks at the Pentagon, they think it's 50-50. Roughly 50% of these folks are infiltrators. They came in with that as their goal, sort of a human IED to explode down the road when the opportunity presented itself. But a lot of them, are just personal grievances. There's a lot of friction between U.S. and allied forces and the Afghans. Both come from very different backgrounds, and they don't always mesh well. So there is a mixture, and that's what makes it tough to stop.
Taliban are taking credit, though, right?
Yes, well, as Secretary of Defense Panetta said earlier this week, basically they claim credit whenever any of these things happen, and that's true. In fact, this past week, Mullah Omar, the leader of the Taliban now in Pakistan, issued a statement taking credit for it. They've welcomed some of these guys who escaped back as heroes. So you can see the Taliban beginning to try to leverage these attacks to their own political ends.
Well, one thing we do know is that they are happening more often, right? So what is the Pentagon? They've said they're going to try to take some new steps.
Yeah, well, they've got an 8-step vetting process. They've had the 8-step vetting process for about 6 months. It involves everything from drug checks, criminal checks, getting 2 letters from your local elders to vouch for you that you're a good guy, a good man, a good kid. But plainly, the spate has increased dramatically. 40% of the killings of this nature since 2007 have happened in the first 7 months of this year. So they're way up, and they're increasing counterintelligence. An order has gone out that U.S. and NATO troops should carry their weapons at all times, even when they are so-called inside the wire, on their base, not outside interacting with folks. And there are now guardian angels. If you've got 3 or 4 Americans training an Afghan platoon, one of them will simply stand and watch and be sure nothing is happening. So it's a very inefficient and demoralizing way to train a fighting force.
I guess the other big question here is to what extent, if any, it's having an impact on the overall strategy of winding down and turning things over to the Afghans.
Well, that's the problem, of course. Number one, for the U.S. to leave and its allies to leave, they've got to train up the Afghan National Security Forces. They're really ramping that up. There are a lot more Afghans now being trained, and NATO will quickly point out, well, that's one of the problems. We've got a lot more Afghans that we're interfacing with than was the case a year or 2 ago, and that can account for some of the increase. But plainly, it does hamper the handoff, and that is a big concern in the military.
All right, I want to turn to another vexing and actually very sad problem that you've been covering. That's the suicides in the military. According to new figures from the military, in July, 26 active duty soldiers in the Army took their own lives. That represented a big jump, more than twice the number reported for the month of June. The July figure was also the highest since the Army began reporting monthly suicides in 2009. And it made a total of 116 this year. In the Marine Corps, there were 8 suicides in July, up from 6 in June. The Marines have reported 32 so far this year, equaling the number for all of 2011. So, Mark, you've been watching this over time, as have we on this program. What's the thinking about why the new spike?
Well, I think it's interesting. You know, we're just talking about these green on blue attacks. Suicides are the same way in the sense that both are unexpected killings in a war zone. But the war has been going on for a decade, and that weighs heavily both on the guys fighting it on the American side, which can lead to suicide among really depressed soldiers, as well as these sort of green on blue attacks as the enemy figures out the best way to, where we may be the most vulnerable. Plainly, you talk to anybody in the military, yes, the turnstile deployments of U.S. troops has played a role. Many have not deployed, but there is an overall pressure on the U.S. military that has existed since 9/11. And as we coast to the end of our presence in Afghanistan, as we already have done in Iraq, the military's mental health experts are seeing something somewhat counterintuitive, that, the soldier used to go for 12 months, come home, go, come home, go. They never really relaxed.
And that was used to blame, as a cause for a lot of this.
Right, but now you see when they're coming home and they're staying for a year or 2 or 3, the family's trying to reintegrate in a way where it didn't try to reintegrate before. So for the first time, the military, especially the Army, is seeing a spike in suicides among NCOs, non-commissioned officers. These are the older fellows who tend to be married, so reintegration of the family is important, and have tried to make the Army a career, unlike a lot of the younger guys who come in for 1 or 2 tours and then are gone.
We've got a chart I want to put up here that shows the increase in, this is Army suicide. But this is, this is interesting because, as you're saying, it's going up and up and up, but even as the pace of deployments is going down, right?
Yes.
And after Iraq is over and as the drawdown in Afghanistan continues.
Yeah, mental health problems in the military and elsewhere, going to combat is like a seed. It's planted. It doesn't sprout. It sprouts somewhere, in the next rainy season, and whether that's 6 months or 3 years remains to be seen. But generally, the impact of, traumatic brain injury, of PTSD, actually has to ripen, and it doesn't happen quickly.
And, of course, the military has accepted this as a major problem. They talk about it a lot. They've implemented various programs. So what's the problem? Are they not working, or is there still an access problem, or are they not the solution?
No, there is an access problem, and it remains a stigma problem, although those are going down. But just like with the green on blue killings, Jeff, there are a lot of factors that play into both of these. Consequently, if you fix one, there's 7 others. So there's no sort of one-size-fits-all solution, and that in part is why both are so vexing.
All right, Mark Thompson of Time Magazine, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeff.